All right, welcome to weekly classes, quarter one, week 6. This week we're going to create a die, which is the singular form of dice. We're going to create that, and then we're going to UV map it, and then we are going to create the diffuse map using Photoshop. So the modeling part is actually going to be pretty easy. It'll only take a few seconds. We're going to start with the cube, and then we're going to chamfer the sides. And the next part that will actually be a little more involved is the UVing process. So today we're just doing the modeling in the UV, all right? And we're going to model the die. We're going to prepare the die for UV by resetting the transform, finalize pivots and snaps, planar direction names. We're going to do some basic planar mapping, break some edge, stitch it back together, and then pack the UV so it's ready to go. Now today, like I said, it's going to be a very simple form of UVing. We're not going to go too complicated. We're just going to move on. So I'm going to jump into 3D Studio Max right here, and we're going to start. So I'm going to go over here and create a box. And I'm actually going to use the keyboard entry today to make sure that the box is absolutely perfectly set up. So go over here, click Box in your modified panel, in your command panel here. Go to keyboard entry, and we're going to go ahead and leave it at 0, 0, 0. So this is the location it will show up at, and this is how big it'll be. For today, I'm going to make mine 100 centimeters, by 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. Now I can hit create. Now you'll notice that mine's set in centimeters, and that's fine. From the nice part about centimeters is that it connects directly to Unreal, and our system is already set up for that. So you can find the max start file if you want to pull those settings in, or you can watch my other video on settings so you can get that organized for yourself. If not, you just want to use 100 by 100, 100, or whatever real number you want is fine. If you set it by 100, then all of our settings will be the same. So anyway, so we've got our box, and it's ready to go. Now what we need to do is we're going to chamfer it. So in order to chamfer it, we've got to actually get to the sub-object settings. And the way we do that is by right-clicking on our object, converting to editable poly. So I do that. Now I've got the entire object, okay, that I can modify all the sub-objects here. So I'm going to go into edges, and I can hit the number 2 to toggle that if I wanted to. And I'm just going to marquee select the entire box. All right, now I should get the whole thing. All right, I have ignore backfacing off. I don't actually like ignore backfacing. So here's my 1 meter cube. This is my Minecraft sized cube. And I've got that object, right? Now I'm going to chamfer it. And that's down here under Edit, Edges, right here under Chamfer. I'm going to actually do the settings. Most of the time I use settings because it makes a lot of sense for me. Let's go ahead and make that a 5 centimeters, which is nice and big. And I'm going to increase this to 2 edges. All right. So the edge chamfer amount is 5 centimeters. Or just 5, and then the the segments is 2, and I think that's going to be enough for me. All right, so now I've got a chamfered object, so I'm going to click OK. Now when I render this out, you'll see I've got hard edges, and I don't want those hard edges. So now I'm going to go back into my editable poly. All right. Instead of edge, I'm going to select polygons. I'm going to select the entire object. I can just hit Control and press the A key. So hold Control and press A to get everything. Control A is all. Now I'm going to go ahead and smooth all that out by going to Properties up here, Smooth. Now if I just click Smooth, it'll instantly smooth the entire object. If I highlight Properties and pull the arrow down, I can smooth selected. But since everything's selected, it smooths it anyway. So either one of those will work. Now we'll render it again just to check. That looks nice and smooth, and I think it looks pretty good. Pretty good. So we're done modeling. Woohoo! Fastest ever. So when we're done modeling, the first thing we need to do after that, right before we do some UVing, is we need to prepare the die for UVing. Right? So there's a couple different things I want to do today to make sure I'm ready to UV. Number one, I want to make sure my pivot point is set. Now in a die, you'd probably want the pivot point to be set right in the center of it, because the pivot point is usually where the object's going to rotate around. So you want that to be centered probably in the exact center of the object. So from the top view, if I press T, I can see that I'm actually already centered from along the Y and X axis. But from the front, it's actually set at 0, 0, 0, which is nice if I want it to sit on the ground or if I want to snap it to the ground. But for my die, I think I want to be able to roll it around, and we'll let Unreal take care of collision if we get to that point. So for now, let's go ahead and take that and move that collision up, or move that pivot point up. The way we're going to move the pivot point up is by going into this hierarchy tab. So click on the hierarchy tab, and we're going to affect pivot only, which is right here. Now you'll notice your cursor changes. I'm going to hit W so I can move that pivot around. And I'm also going to turn on snapping. I'm going to come up here and right click on the snapping area and make sure I'm snapping to grid points only. So I'll turn off my vertex and grid lines and close that. Alright, and I'm going to hit S for snap. I hit A on accident. I hit S for snap. I'm going to snap up, and I'm going to hold left so that I can see what I'm snapping to and make sure I'm snapping to just the center. Alright, and I turn affect pivot only off and go back to my create tab, or my modify tab actually. So now it looks in the center. I want to go to top, looks in the center, left, looks in the center. Fantastic. So now my die pivots around its center of mass, right? Which for a die is easy because it's just the center of the entire object. Alright, great. So that part's done. We have the center set up. We've got our chamfers. We've made things look nice and smooth. So now we're ready to start UVing. Before we start UVing, we want to make sure that we reset the transforms. What that does is it says, okay, all of the different things that you've done to this object so far, you've rotated stuff, the computer remembers how you've rotated things, how you've adjusted or changed stuff. It doesn't really matter that we chamfered it, but if we did any sort of rotations, any sort of modification, we want to make sure that we reset that. Okay? So I'm going to come up here to the hammer under utilities, right up here, this hammer. Click on that, and then I'm going to go to reset X form. Click there, and then click this button. That's it. It actually set in our modify tab. You can see I jumped over the modify tab. It says X form. So we reset the transforms, and you see I've got an orange box around it. I'm going to right click and collapse all because I want to make sure that stays and is set. I don't want it to have any more problems. Not that it had problems. Actually, not that this would matter. I don't actually think in this particular die case that resetting transforms makes a difference. However, getting used to resetting transforms before you start UVing is a great practice that takes 2 seconds and is really helpful because it eliminates some problems before they have a chance to rear their ugly head, especially when you're like relaxing stuff and suddenly it doesn't relax properly. Okay, great. So now we're ready to start UVing. Let's go ahead and name our die since I haven't done that yet. Let's just call it DIE for die. That'll be fine for now. Under modifier list, click on the modifier list and type UN, and it'll automatically jump down to Unwrap UVW, and then you can just hit enter, or you can move this down and click Unwrap. There you go. So that added the Unwrap UVW modifier onto our plane, or onto our die. Okay, now in the Unwrap UV modifier, we have 3 different sub-object selections. You recognize them from before. We have 1 is vertex, 2 is edge, 3 is polygons. All right, over here, without being able to hit the number, there's no number here, but it's select by element. Okay, that means if I grab a plane, it will automatically grab all the planes that are attached to that plane. Okay. Over here we have grow selection and shrink selection. Over here we have ignore backfacing, which I'm going to turn off because I don't like it. I'm going to scroll down here, down to the Edit UV tab under Open UV Editor. Click that. It's going to bring up a whole new window. Okay, this whole new window is what we're going to work in and when we're unwrapping our UV. So what we've done is we've got this cube and we need to think of projections. Okay, so when we have a side, an edge here, we are projecting an image onto it. Okay, and there's multiple different types of projection. If we scroll down, you can see projection down here. Today we're only going to work with this first type of projection, which is called planar map. Okay? When we planar map something, so for instance this face, and I'm going to grow it by clicking this button, grow, like that. You could do the same thing up here. So I'm going to grow, let's just do the top, because we're going to build this whole thing from the top, okay? So I'm going to scroll down. My planar map only planar maps whatever I have selected. So I'm just going to planar map the top, right? The top of the die. From the front, if I hit front, that's the front. I'm going to scroll over so you can see the front. So this is the front face, and that's the top. I'll go perspective so you can see a little better. All right, I'm going to planar map this from the Z direction. Now, sometimes it's difficult when you're starting out to figure out what direction is which. You can see down here in the corner, I've got Z, Y, and X. And as I rotate around, you can see how that moves. It's a compass of sorts. Z is up and down, Y is front to back, and X is left to right. And that's consistent. So we are going to planar map this along the Z axis. Okay, so I've got my planar map. I'm going to planar map from Z. What that does is it acts like there's a projector from above projecting down on this object because it's on the Z axis. All right, if I did a Y axis, it would be from a projector that's at the position of the front camera, so front, firing at this direction, like boom, boom, boom. So from the top, we have planar map from Z, and that gives us this direction, which then gives us this. All right, in order to move this, because what we're going to do is we're going to planar map all these sides, and we're going to stitch them together, because whenever we planar map a side, it breaks it off of the rest of the object, and you'll see what I mean. So let's go ahead and click on this little polygon button down here, double click on it, and that lets us move things. Now, I like using the freeform mode. All of your tools are up here. Okay, move, rotate, scale, but this freeform mode allows you to do all of the above. All right, to move something, you highlight inside of the face somewhere, but not in the center. If you notice, I'm going to full screen this for a second. If you notice, when I get to the center, my cursor changes color to a white cross instead of a black cross. There it is. So I don't want the white cross, I want the black cross, and I'm going to click somewhere in here and just click and drag using the left mouse button to scoot it over. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken this object and I've scooted it over. Okay, that motion of moving it over helps me see the rest of the edges. Now I can actually grab the entire rest of the object by highlighting here. Now it's all kind of a mess, and the way it's built and is streaking is weird, but for now let's just go ahead and stick with what we've got. So I'm going to marquee select this top part. Okay, now what I want to do is I already planar mapped it, so that's good, and this is the top, so I'll move it over. Now what I want to do is relax it, because these edges over here, see how skinny that is? If I look at something from the top, the perspective makes it look smaller, but we all know, because we live in a real world, that this side is actually large. It's just from our perspective of looking at the top, it's going to be smaller. Okay, so what we need to do is relax these. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out over here and go to Tools, Relax. Okay, now when I click that, it's going to bring up a whole new set of tools. All right, or a whole new toolbox. All right, generally, whenever we relax things, we're going to relax by polygon angles. The default is edge angles, but I wish it was polygon angles because I use polygon angles 90% of the time. So if I relax by polygon angles and I hit start, you're going to watch this edge is going to pop out. Boom. The outside stayed basically the same, but the outside edges got bigger by shrinking the inside. Okay, so now that's a much closer to actual size representation of the object itself. Now think of it kind of like a piece of paper that's been folded. If you try and stretch it, it doesn't stretch too well, and sometimes you get weird stretching on the corners. So what we're going to do now is we're going to split some of these edges. Okay, we can actually grab edges, individual edges, like this one here, and this one here, So we can click that, hold Control, click that, and I can actually break this edge. That's what this button over here, break the edge. So what that does is it makes it, it's kind of like snipping this. Okay? Now when I take this object and relax it again, you'll see this edge corner pops out. Okay? What that does is it gives a more accurate representation of what this side should be. Because what's happening is it's kind of getting stretched and pulled over and trying to make the difference for all that. So I'm going to go ahead and break all those edges quickly. So I'm going to grab this one and break it. Oops, I stitched it. Break it. That's better. I'll do the same thing up here. Grab these two. Grab this one, and break it. Now, when I relax the entire thing, I like to use faces so you can see it better. If I'm going to hit relax, you'll see that this is a much more square shape now. Do you notice how these aren't quite perfectly straight, even though realistically they probably should be? Well, that's some of the stretching we were talking about. The computer tries to do its best to average the distance so that all the edges are straight. Now, if you look at this, it's absolutely straight. If we snip this off, this would also be straight. But what we're dealing with is how many edges are we going to work with? Because the more edges we have, the more likely you're going to see a seam in the geometry. Okay, so that's where UV becomes an art form. It's not just a matter of, oh, I just break it up in as many pieces as I want, because we're going to have to draw on this object later to create the sides. And it gets much, much more complicated the further you get through it. But for now, we did the top. Okay, so now let's do the front. So from the front, I'm going to hit 3 so I can grab polygons. All right, and then I'm going to grow this again, like that, and like that. Open the UV editor. Now you'll notice I actually got some of these, and I don't want these, so I'm going to hold Alt and deselect those. I had to double click on this, so I only got the ones I wanted. Now you'll notice I've got all of those corners, which is good. I don't have any of these because I've already mapped those. And now I'm going to planar map from the front, which is down here. You always have to hit planar, decide what type of map, and then what direction. The front is along Y. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to position it close to where the other one was. And I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to break some of these edges too. All right. Now, this edge is straight. I'm going to go ahead and break this edge as well. So I'm going to grab that one and break it. Now I'll do the same thing on the other side. Grab this one and break it. Now I can grab this object. This is the select by element. If I click this, every single edge that's connected that we just planar mapped will be selected. So we'll do that. So tools, relax, poly, boom. Okay, so that's pretty straight. Now, here's the part where we get a little fancy, but not really. I'm going to select this object, and I'm going to try and line up this edge right there. Okay? And then I'm going to use my fancy tool up here, my freeform mode, and I'm going to hold Control and scale this in until that lines up with that. Okay, a little more there, close enough. Now I'm going to move this up so that they're real close together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stitch these two pieces together, and I can do that via edge. So grab edge by pressing 2 or by clicking the button down here, and then click one of these green edges. Now you'll notice one is red and one is blue. Over here we have our stitching tools. Stitching tools are great because they allow us to stitch our UVs back together, which means if I want to draw like a snake that goes all the way through here, there won't be a weird disconnect in the snake via a seam. So I'm going to stitch to the average. So the average of red and blue. Stitching to average is this middle one. If I wanted to go red to blue, then I click the first one and the red moves to blue. I'm going to undo that. If I wanted blue to red, I click this one and the blue moves to where the red is. But since I've got it pretty much close to where I want it to be, I'm just going to average the two, which is the middle one. This last one is your own custom stuff. I don't actually use that very often. Maybe it's super valuable, but I don't use it, so I don't know. But now if you look at what we have, I'm going to select these two objects. You'll see that I've got the top and the front. Now I'm going to continue doing this by grabbing this section here. Actually, let's do this section. There and there. Actually, I think I'm just going to grab these. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and leave. If I grab this one, you'll notice I'm getting this side, and I don't want that one. And I don't want this top one either, because that's part of there. So I'm just going to grab this, and that, and that. Alright, so once again, I'm going to planar map. And you can see, as soon as I do that, it starts doing it. I'm going to planar map along the x-axis. Okay, because x is right and left, and we want it to be perpendicular. So we want to get the flat side of the face. Alright, so that's x. So here's the front here. We've got x. I'm going to double click here. Move this up. Now we know that right here we can actually see. Remember we said red to blue, right? Now you notice I've got blue edges over here and red over here. I can actually select the edges themselves and see where they connect. So this one connects right there. So I'm going to highlight the whole thing, and I'm going to rotate it using my freeform tool, which allows me to rotate by clicking and dragging in the center. Now if you're not selecting and moving only 5 degrees, hit A for angle snap. So I just turn my angle snap off, so I get like a really granular number. But I want A for angle snap, so I get nice 90-degree turn. Do the same thing. I'm going to scroll it down, holding Alt. Control. Alt shrinks to the center. Now I'm going to move it over a little bit. Notice I'm not using I don't have to use the polygon tool, but I could if I wanted to. Click one. Don't click both. If you click both and try and average, it worked that time, but sometimes it gets really weird. Really weird. I'm just going to click one edge and average them together. Alright, now you'll notice it's not perfectly straight, and we'll fix that by relaxing the entire thing at the end. Alright, from the front. Again, I'm going to do the same thing on the other X side, and we'll see what happens. So, let's go ahead. I'm going to grab my faces, hit 3, grab that face, and that face. Notice they're all over here. I don't have any of the ones I had already. Control X. Alright. Double click this polygon, move it over here because I know it should be here-ish. I also know that if I grab edge by hitting the number 2, I should be able to click here and see that that blue one is there. So I'm going to rotate the whole thing 90 degrees. I'm going to line it up by holding control. I'm going to resize it a little bit. Okay, so that's basically lined up. I'm going to click this edge and stitch the average. Oh goodness, that's a mess. What is going on? Why didn't it work over there? Well, what happens is, whenever you planar map, and we planar map from X, the planar map comes from the this direction. Alright, so this is the front view. So the planar map comes from this direction. So it hits the left side first and hits the outside of that face. However, if we planar map the other side of X, it actually is planar mapping the inside. So what happens is, I'm going to go back here. What happens is, this face is actually flipped inside out. Alright, you can't tell. In Maya you can, but in 3D Studio you can't tell unless you go to Select up here, Select Inverted Polygons. And you'll notice this one's flipped, and so are these two. So we've got to flip this. Now I know that this side here is the one I want. So I want to flip this from the top to the bottom. So it flips like that. We can do that by going up here, left click and hold, and go down to the next option, which is mirror. When I do that and let go, it automatically flips. Once again, you can't really tell, but you're going to have to trust me. So it flipped, hit the number 2. My edge is already selected. If not, I just click it and click average, and it's good. Alright, cool. So we're almost done. We've only got 2 more sides to go. So from the front, I'm going to rotate all the way around to the back. Alright, I'm going to make sure I've got my polys on. Click there. I'm going to select that one, and that one, and that one. And what about that one, and that one, and that one, and that one? Now the back is kind of Not confusing, but we're gonna get a lot of pieces here. All right, make sure you don't miss any. All right, cool. Now you'll notice we just have those pieces. Now this is the back, so we're going to planar map from Y. But remember, like I said before we were at the front, and from the projection comes from the front and is now hitting the back inside face of this. So it's flipped. So if we can double check by select inverted, you can see this is selected. So what I need to do is I need to flip this. Well, I can go into edge mode and select this and see that this should be over there. Okay, so either way you do this is fine. I'm going to actually rotate it first, 180 degrees. I want to resize it. I'm going to have to slice this one a little bit too. So I've got that. Now if I stitch them together, I hit 2, stitch, it twists, and that's no good. Okay, looks like I may have some extra geometry there too. We'll fix that in a second. So if I can't stitch those together, so what I've got to do is go back in here, okay, and I'm going to flip it. Now because I've already got the edge on the right side, I'm going to flip from right to left, which is up here. So I hold the button. I'm not letting go of my left mouse button until I've got on the tool I want, let go, and it flipped. So now I can grab the edge and stitch it, and it shouldn't be weird. All right, great. Now we can grab the edges that we want to slice, which are this. Oops. We don't want that. Just want that. All right. I had the select by element on. We didn't want that. I probably should have relaxed these first, but it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna do that. Now I'm gonna grab the whole thing and relax. Tools, relax by poly. Boom. All right, cool. How's that look? Looks okay. All right, for final piece, we have the bottom. Just the bottom, because we've gotten everything else already. So we are going to planar map that from Z, because we are looking from the front. All right. All right, so see that's the bottom. Planar map that from Z. And once again, because we are planar mapping from the top, all right, we're going to have, the whole thing's going to be flipped. Now we can flip it whichever way you want. We can actually just double check, select inverted. This is the only one that's the problem. I'm going to flip it, and then I'm going to figure out which edge is the one I wanted. So is this one right? No. This one? No. That one? No. This one. Yay! Okay. So I grab the whole thing, rotate it 180 degrees. I'll rescale it a little bit. Move it up there. Grab just one of them and stitch to average. Okay, so now I've got my entire die unwrapped. Looks like a lowercase t. Tools. Now I can relax the entire thing by polygon angles. And you'll notice it doesn't make a big difference, but it sort of cleans up any sort of things we missed. Boom. Now everything's nice and straight. And we're ready to go. So now all we need to do is pack it into our UV space. So I'm going to move it down here. And I'd like to get as close as I can to the corner, the top left corner. And then I'm going to hold control and scale it in. Because if I don't hold control and I scale it, it gets all twisted, and we don't want, or not twisted, but it resizes in a weird way. We want to keep its proportions the same. So now I zoom in a little more. We cannot be outside of this box. If we're outside of this box, it'll actually overlap onto the other side, and that will be real problematic. All right, so once it's all set up and stuck inside the box, I'm going to check to make sure I'm not going over. It's kind of like Price is Right. There we go. Good, good, good. Okay, now we're good. Now we're ready to export it out. To export this thing out, we go to Tools again. Go to, actually, let's save our work real quick. So go to File, Save As. I'm going to save it. Where are we doing the die? YouTube stuff, current assets. All right, so I'm going to call this die day 1. All right, okay, just in case. All right, cool, saved. All right, great. So I'm going to open up my UV again. All right, so I'm back to where I was. So go to Tools, Render UVW Template. Now what that does is it gives us a render UVW template. Now generally for width and height you want to use a much larger version than you'll actually use in your game. Okay, because we can always take a UVW and export it out as a lower resolution, but we can't get bigger on it. So even though a die is something small, even though our die is like a meter, doesn't matter. Even though a die is something small, I'm still going to render it out as 1024 by 1024, and it has to be square and it has to be binary. This makes your life so much easier. Binary means it's a multiple of 2. So it's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, etc., etc. Realistically, we won't ever do anything bigger than 2048, but for a die, I think 1024 is a great number. When we render UVW template, it pops this up, and this is what we call our actual UV. This is our coloring book that we're going to create our actual diffuse map on. So I'm going to go to Save Image, and I'm going to save it as die underscore UV. Okay, and we're going to save it as a PNG. The reason we save it as a PNG is because, and I use 24-bit because I found that 48-bit size is huge. So do RGB 24-bit, 16.7 million. Make sure the alpha channel is on. The default for alpha is on, so that's okay. Click OK. And there we go. The reason we save that as a PNG is so you can see through it. So that's done. And close that. Save our work again. So I'm going to save this again. And then we're ready for day 2 because we've UV'd our object. We're ready to go. We stitched it back together. Now we're ready for day 2 of our project, where we will open it up in Photoshop and move on from there. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll open up Photoshop and start actually getting some Photoshop work done. Now if you don't have any experience in Photoshop, that's absolutely fine. The next video is going to go through the very basics of Photoshop, and to be honest, I'm not that great at Photoshop either, but I can give you enough information to get through. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a good one.